I would like to recognise the traditional custodians of the land on which I am privileged to be recording this vodcast today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to recognise their elders past, present and emerging. Hello everybody and welcome back to The Growth Distillery. I'm your host Dan Krigstein. On this episode, I'm talking to Nick Ingate, founder of Sabbatical Travel and former partner at brand consultancy The Projects. Nick and I talk about everything from experience and community and the role that they play in the brand marketer's toolkit, to why the business of being well is now everyone's business. Now, let's get into it. Nick Ingate, welcome to the show.
Dan,
thank you for coming. So today we are here to talk about the business of being well. And I think that you've got an incredible story to tell in this space. In preparation for this conversation, I had a look back over your career, and I think where I'd love to start today is experience and the role of experience in the brand marketer's toolkit, because I think that's a good starting point for us to then jump off into being well.
Yeah.
If I look back over your career has spanned a number of really, really interesting facets that orbit the power of experience in the brand marketer's toolkit. Was that, serendipitous opportunity? You jumping from role to role, from the projects all the way through to Heist Nobody and then now into Sabbatical Travel, or is that something that you've actively pursued?
Yeah, love it. Well, thanks for having me here today.
You're welcome.
That journey that you speak of starts around 2010. It starts in California, where marketing dollars were coming from above the line and going to below the line. So it used to be called events, and then it started moving towards this notion of experiential marketing. And we were eating away at the above the line dollars and bringing them to the below the line. And the experience economy was born. And what a better place to do that than Los Angeles and then New York and then London and Sydney. So that's kind of where the journey started.
And talk me through, I'd love to understand the magic behind the activation. Why was there that transition towards experiential marketing?
We'd always start with the brief. So very similar to, above the line campaigns. The brief would come through and it was around connecting with an audience. So we would often sit on the brand side of where the marketing dollars would go. Obviously, performance marketing and sales marketing important, but we were on that the warm and fuzzy end of where the dollars would go around building experience. Because as we know, if you walk into a space and there's an event designed for you, your five senses are activated. And what you get from that are these meaningful moments that you share, that you experience with your friends, your peers, your loved ones. And it's all around brands connecting with their audiences on a deeper level.
It's funny you say that because we had Ricky Pierce on last episode talking about, particularly at the moment, the power of shared experience. Okay, so the career starts working on, these amazing brand activations, and then, moves into, the world of, Heist Nobody, right? Ultra high net worth youth. Right? Which I think is similarly in this space of creating experience, albeit through publication.
Right. So after a decade of working in the luxury lifestyle space, we moved into Heist Nobody, and they are a Gen Z youth publication. And they were on a bit of a journey going from a publisher in the traditional sense, moving into Heist Nobody as brand. And Heist Nobody as a brand had more responsibility to build experience, to build community, and to change the thinking from eyeballs to customers. So I was really part of that journey to help open their business in Australia and open up APAC. And you're right, that Gen Z, how they think about luxury and what new luxury is to them is completely different to perhaps how you and I think about it and baby boomers.
I'd love to double click on that on that juxtaposition of luxury across the age spectrum in a second. But before we do, I'd love to get your philosophy, or at least your perspective on, particularly now with where we are at 2023, why should experience matter, and matter in a big way, if you're a brand marketer trying to engage and talk to audiences authentically?
Post-pandemic, we're all coming out of Zoom of death, and we have lost or put on pause the ability to connect with our peers. So coming out of that and being in 2023, the importance of regaining connection with each other is super important. So if a brand, luxury brand or any brand, can create experiences that speak to me and meet me where I'm at, and I can have that shared lived experience with other people, it taps into a sense of belonging, it taps into a sense of community, and it all ladders up to where these brands, what their value proposition are into my life. And the brands that do it really, really, really well, they're almost religious. They have cult-like status. They have iconography. They have moments that we all share and participate in those particular communities and those experiences. So now more than ever, if you're not thinking about experience and brand experience, you're asleep at the wheel.
I love that concept of brand religion, right? Because fundamentally brands are in the business of finding people who believe what they believe.
Totally.
And I think if you are a brand that ascends to this status of religion, you've flipped the script.
Completely.
What you've then got is you've got people who believe that they believe what your brand believes.
Correct.
And I think that that's an incredibly
there's a
powerful.
playbook. There's icons, so there's the crosses, there's the leaders, there are the rituals that we do to participate in that brand narrative and that brand story. So the ones who do it really, really well, there's a playbook that the religious groups do as well.
Yeah, it's a sobering analogy, right? How similar it is, but how effective it can be in the brand marketer's toolkit. All right. So you mentioned luxury, and I'd love to get your take. This is clearly a space that you've got a real depth of experience in. Talk to me about New Luxury Redefined. I know that this is a space that you've published in.
Right. So we did a lot of research with our Boston Consulting Group around Gen Z audience insights and understanding what new luxury means to them. And it's widely different. An obvious flex of perhaps baby boomers and maybe our generation would be the Rolex. It would be the possession of the Rolex and what that communicated to the outside world. Now, a new luxury code is knowledge. So it's perhaps not that Rolex watch. It is the Swatch Bape collaboration that only gets released on this particular date at this particular time at shop. So that knowledge is a new luxury code. Community, another luxury code. So it's this, instead of being exclusive, it's about being inclusive. So there's all these little transitions going from old luxury to new luxury that Gen Z are just are leading the charge.
I like that. And one area that I'm fascinated by in terms of this transition is this shift away from ownership. And you would think, even particularly in the luxury space, ownership would reign supreme, right? And the fact that we are seeing even in the luxury space this sort of diffusion of ownership and this shift towards even at a luxury level experience and community. I think is something that's really quite profound, and I'd love to get your take. How is this manifesting in some really brilliant ways?
Right. Well, it's kind of interesting. The great Australian dream or the great American dream was kind of owning your house and owning your car in the driveway, and we're seeing shifts across the board. So, in that context, but also in the luxury context. So, we've seen it in the fashion space with more of these rent the runway type platforms. Where why do you need to own the $5,000 Dior dress when you can just rent it once or twice? A great example, which I know that you love, is what Porsche and Porsche Passport are up to. So, a Porsche customer is probably a 65-year-old male. What is Gen Z doing, and what's their relationship to Porsche? So Porsche have come out recently in tier 2 markets in the US as a test case to launch Porsche Passport, which is a subscription-based service for people to gain access to their fleet of cars. So perhaps you and I might be driving the 911 Monday to Friday, but when we want to head down to Thredbo on the weekend, we might, with our application, dial up and have the Cayenne in our driveway. So it's this transition from the flex is less the ownership of the car, but it's more the access and then what type of experiences that access allows for me, my family, and my peers.
There's a couple of really important phenomena I want to talk to in that example of Porsche. The first is around the creation of community. Even in the luxury ecosystem, right? It's less about, elitism and isolation, right? The one of one, and much more around being part of an elevated community. And I know that this is something that you are heavily involved in. I've had the pleasure of watching and being part of a number of communities that you've developed over the years. And I'd love to ask the same question that I did around experience. What's your perspective on the role or the growing role, or the diminishing role of community in the marketer's toolkit as you go and you build these brands and, if you're aspiring to that brand religion status?
Yeah. If we can agree that a brand experience activates the senses and creates more meaningful engagement with brand and people who are present at the experiences, then the next question is, well, who are you sharing that with? And that sense of belonging is within us all. It's a deep, deep primal feeling. So that sense of belonging is what's activated or engaged when community is built. And you don't need to look too far when you find those brands that are community-led, like think of Reebok and CrossFit. If you've ever met a CrossFit person, they are animals, and the community that they keep is like their family.
Yeah.
So, and they have codes, they have rituals, they have outfits that you wear, and those brands that lead with community just seem to...
Yeah, the brand permeates their lifestyle.
Correct.
This is a great jump-off point for us to talk about the business of being well, because fundamentally what Porsche or any brand that's selling a recurrent product is doing is shifting from the utilitarian value of the product itself and much more into the subjective benefits that it delivers to you as a person. And I think there are few people that I know that walk the talk on the business of being well as much as you. And I would love to talk about sabbatical travel, which is where you currently are living and breathing, and and I know a lot of your energy is going there. So for those that might not know and who are listening in,
what is it?
What is sabbatical travel?
How did we get here?
What is sabbatical travel, and how did we get here?
Beautiful. I think most of us would, when you hear the word sabbatical travel, it's this idea that you work for 20, 30, 40 years, completely burnt out, and then you take your year off. We're trying to reframe that and re-educate, because if you actually look at the word sabbatical, it's biblical reference, Sabbath, and what particular religion you're a part of. That's a Friday, that's a Sunday. That is an active weekly moment that one has to reflect and be with family. So it is not this notion that you bust your butt for 30 years and then take time off. We're trying to make it more of an active role in your life. So then what is sabbatical travel? We partner with professionals, clients, and we are helping them on their transformational journey. So what we're really trying to do here is engage clients who are on a path to be the best versions of themselves. And we partner with Mother Nature as our canvas for this growth. So we identify closer as a transformational business than we do a travel business. So we work with executives, we work with founders, we work with people in all layers of business to really identify what on their hierarchy of needs, what is self-actualization, what does a life well lived look like? Are you worthy of that life? And really get at people's core and allow them to share that with us, and then we design experiences based on that to achieve their full transcend themselves. And we do that in Australia, we do that in Africa, wherever it takes our clients.
Wherever it resonates most. I mean, I love the concept. And everyone that I have spoken to, even in the preemption of this episode, has loved the concept. So how did it come about, right? Was this, is this just your trademark, preemption of the flood?
No.
Is it just, you trying to take a category and, altruistically, make people's lives better? Is it both?
It's a good question. I guess it goes back to walking the walk. In the businesses that I've been involved with in the past, there was a white space, there was a business plan, there was strategy, and there was all that normal stuff. And I still think that's all a worthy cause. This is not that. I went through a process myself, exiting a business in 2019, and took myself on my own sabbatical, and just observed that there was no source of truth. There was no brand in the world that I could find that spoke to me, that would deliver the quality and the excellence of these types of experiences to help me be the best version of myself, to be the best dad that I wanted to be, and what role do I have with my time left on this planet. So it was through just an observation and then going through my own 10-day meditation retreat that this idea came through me. So there's this sense of this is a calling. And I'm in service to this greater idea of bringing transformation to the world, as there are many other products and services and books and podcasts that are in this same space. And I guess we're kind of bracketed underneath the overarching travel sector, which is great. And we've got corporate travel, we've got recreational travel, we've got adventure travel, and now we've got wellness travel is probably like a really popular segment that you guys cover all the time. I would say we're the next step inward from where wellness travel stops, and then we kind of pick up. And it's really tailored, really personalized experiences on your path to be the best version of yourself. This idea that we are on a path to be the best version of ourselves, we're one of the tools in the toolkit. And if we're lucky enough to work with you, we just unlock Mother Nature's amazing healing powers. And that's our dance floor for transformation.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it aligns, beautifully to what we're seeing in wellbeing. I mean, again, we've had the pleasure of unpacking being well in a really deep and expansive way, and we're seeing this play out this year, that not only is everybody on this journey of self-betterment, and I think the pandemic has acted as a lightning rod towards inward reflection and outward effort towards the pursuit of X, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of nourishment, the pursuit of identity, whatever that might be. And we see this play out even in the things that people can and can't live without. Last month we were talking about, the essentials and what makes something essential, and travel and well-being.
I like that. Netflix.
Yeah.
Core essential. I relate.
Yeah. And I think what you've stumbled upon, ironically, is at the nexus of, I would say, all four of those tectonic shifts that we saw. So I guess my provocation to you, Nick, would be, are we now all in the business of being well? Doesn't matter what your canvas is, what your industry is, what your sector is. Fundamentally, as a brand or as someone that is selling a service or a product, you are in the business of someone's journey towards self-betterment.
Yeah. I'd like to answer that in two ways.
Go for it.
We set out to kind of very much be a one-to-one service, but as this is unfolding and as the cultural context of Australia and the world is changing, we're now getting inquiries from leadership at, big accounting firms, tech firms, and they're wanting to understand, what does being well look like? How can we retain staff through wellness campaigns? How can performance be measured through activities that are out of our office that help us deliver on our staff, bottom line, and our role in business? So it's been super interesting that these corporate businesses are rethinking what it is being well with their staff and with their output. And then the fact that we have a role to play and that the leaders of these business are championing wellness and the business of being well is amazing. Part two of answering your question around, is this a shift, or I see it as an awakening. It is, I think, a shift towards...
Of course you do.
Of course.
Of course you do.
Because I think calling it a shift or calling it a trend, I think really underserves what is happening in the world. I think young people, all people, are reframing what it is to be selfish. I think for a long time that word had a negative connotation to it, but I think now you see it everywhere. You see Oura rings, you see personalized vitamin subscriptions. It is all around the self and the personalization. And we're seeing across the board that this putting oneself in a really powerful way is the way we're moving forward. And then wouldn't people then say that is being selfish, and would we rather not act selfless? And we're like, no. You hear it every time you get on a plane. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. So it's taking that same notion right through to the human experiences. Nick being the best version of myself. That could look like exercise. That could look like meditation, health, diet. Having clear boundaries then allows me to fill up my cup, and all that overflow is what my family, my colleagues, and the universe get. So for me, it's not a shift. It is an awakening on all levels, that people are reclaiming agency over their lives, reclaiming agency over who they are and how they operate. And if you're not in the business of being well, I don't know what business you're in.
I love that. And I love that you've got to fill up your cup and the world gets the overflow. And I think, and as you said, we see this across every spectrum of psychology, right? Both consumer and otherwise, that you've got to take care of yourself first. All right.
But you did challenge me last time we spoke to think of products or services that aren't in the business of being well. And I haven't found one.
Good. I'm glad that holds true.
I went through big pharma, I went through everyone, and I just everyone has a role to play and communicate to their customers around the business of being well, and what role does the umbrella company right through to the doctor. And it's, yeah.
I'm glad that I finally stumped you on something. We're getting towards the back end of what has been an illuminating conversation, as always, with you, Nick. And I'd like to get your perspective on a few things, what we call through the looking glass. First question, how do you foresee brands and the sort of the relationship with being well evolving this year?
I think we've heard a lot over the last couple of years about speaking with transparency. I think that's still valid, but I think that can evolve into speaking with vulnerability. And business leaders, you're seeing it more and more in government, people leading with vulnerability and connecting on that level, in addition to transparency, is a really scary place for a lot of brands to be. But it's also, again, it's meeting people, culture where they're at, and we are open to receive vulnerability from businesses and brands and our leaders in culture. So I would say that kind of doubling down on transparency and then even moving through vulnerability. And also going back to grassroots basics. So maybe dial down the sales messaging and the performance messaging, particularly as we're going through maybe some tightening of the wallets, but really dialing up your brand comms, and you're playing it for the long term. So really doubling down on those stories, those experiences, those ways to connect without your sales messaging.
I love that. And I think that there's an interesting connective thread between what you mentioned around vulnerability with brands and what James Leggett and I were discussing a couple of episodes ago around bravery in brands. And I think it takes an incredible level of bravery for a brand to walk alongside someone vulnerable in their journey.
Correct.
And I think that the connection and the resonance and the salience that you can create as a brand in that circumstance is transcendent relative to, as you mentioned, sticking to utilitarian, form and function messages.
Right. I liked how you guys tapped on being brave is being measured and making decisions with information rather than just this different interpretation of being cavalier. So I like that.
Brave is not bravado, as James said. Okay, your 3 rules for sustainable growth in this space for the coming year.
I think we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but it's really meeting people where they're at. So particularly on the business of being well, we would be better served to meet our audience where they're at on their journey, rather than showing people these big, beautiful pictures of these transcended families or these transcended bodies. So it's really having a bit of humility and vulnerability with your messaging and connecting on a personalized level, which goes back to our, one of our new luxury codes. It's this, instead of exclusivity, it's around personalized communication and being quite considerate of where you're at. It's around provenance. Do what you say what you mean. And the final one would be go slow to go fast. So it's kind of pushing back on this hustle culture that we've kind of seen over the last couple of years. The Elon Musks of the world, think that's kind of burning out, but it's really slowing down, looking inward. And I think we talked on this last time. The archer pulls back his bow to get the perfect aim before he releases. So it's all that whole notion of just like looking inward first and then moving forward with action.
Pull back slowly to launch forward fast. I like that. And I think a word on what this doesn't look like.
I think we've just gone through greenwashing, or perhaps we're still in the whole greenwashing movement. So this isn't slapping an organic logo on your communications. It's really, again, going back to providence. It's kind of do what you say what you mean, and having accountability with your messaging. And it's also we're human. So keep the humility front of mind, particularly as we're building community and we're building experience. Deliver your value proposition on that human one-to-one level.
And I think the risk is if you to your point, if you don't toe that line of authenticity, the blowback can be catastrophic. We're seeing this play out in a number of areas at the moment, aren't we?
Oh, there's a great example. Hottest luxury fashion brand the last 2 years was Balenciaga. They went one step too far and they're just complete pushback. And they have torched their brand equity. And, there's many other case studies where if you're not authentic and meeting people where they're at, the blowback is horrendous.
Do what you say what you mean. Nick, thank you, mate. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute delight. And I cannot wait to see where Sabbatical Travel goes.
Thank you.
I look forward to being an active participant in a transformative journey.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm humbled to be here.
Cheers, mate.